Studies show that the impact of autism is not only on the parents, but also the entire and the community. Hello and welcome to another edition of Let's Give It a Voice here at the Voice of Hope Media with myself, A. Simbeng, as the host, where we will be giving a voice on autism impact on various aspects of family and community lives. Here at the Voice of Hope Media, we give a voice to those issues often regarded as emotional, sensitive, taboo, or those issues where people feel they should be kept under the carpet. We aim at empowering, inspiring, educating, and giving hope to individuals who are facing challenging and complex life issues, including special educational needs. So, those affected will be able to speak up, speak out, knowing they will be heard and they won't be judged or stigmatized. Because we know every experience is worthy, it is valuable, and it has the power to transform our lives. You are welcome once more, and you are tuned onto the Voice of Hope Media Facebook page and the YouTube channel, also the Voice of Hope Media. Our guest speakers today are Father Dominic, Dr. Judwin, and Mr. Eric Moore, and also Mrs. Sandra Mame, where they will talk extensively on autism, diagnosis, prevalence, signs, symptoms, and also what is it that we are doing as a community to support individuals with autism. And also, we are going to look at the impact of autism on the families and also the community at large. You are all welcome once more. And we just want to thank you heartily for giving your time today, for taking this special time to be with us on this show today. For our discussion, as I have said, we are talking on autism impact on various aspects of family and community lives, because we all know that autism does not only affect the families involved, but each and every member of the community and the society. Thank you so much once more. If you're watching, you share, you like, you invite your friends to watch, because some may say today that autism does not um, involve me. I don't have anything to do with autism, but who knows tomorrow? You may not have been directly affected by autism, but there's a neighbor, there's a friend, there's a sister, there's someone near you who has a child with autism. There's someone near you who works with autistic individual who cares for them. It can be a doctor, it can be a teacher, it can be a support worker. So each and every one of us has something to do with autism. So today we are going to start our conversation with Dr. Judwin. So I'll come to you, Doctor. So you tell us more about autism, the prevalence, the signs, the symptoms, etc. And then you will start with your introduction. Welcome once more.
Thank you very much, Clarice. So I'm Judwin. I'm pediatric resident, so like a trainee doctor in pediatrics and based in Nottingham. And I'm really pleased to talk to you all today about this topic, which I find very relevant, especially in our community where we seem to think we have a low prevalence of autism, but actually we have to ask the question, are we missing out on autism diagnosis in our children? Because the end point of missing out on autism diagnosis is that it's our children who suffer. So, in my background, I've also worked, I have quite a few years of experience working in refugee camps with children with all sorts of mental problems and malnourished kids as well. That's in Central Africa, and I'm from Cameroon. So, um, I will, I'm going to share the screen. I'm not sure if I can share it, but if I can't, I'm just going to talk that way.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm talking up today about autism. So a lot of us have heard of autism already. So we do have sort of an idea what autism is. So there's various terms that could be involved. So sometimes we hear about childhood autism, sometimes we hear about atypical autism. We might have even heard about Asperger's syndrome. and some people call it a pervasive disorder. These are, ancient terms. And in the end, so specialists got together and thought, actually, these are all different manifestations of one illness, and so they not illness of one condition, and so they decided to term it autism spectrum of disorders. So it's actually a spectrum of disorders rather than one particular um, problem or diagnosis. So there are two main definitions of autism. We tend to use what we call ICD-10 and DSM-5, and both diagnoses focus on the main characteristics of autism. So autism is an abnormality in social interaction and patterns of communication, which are usually characterized by restricted or stereotyped or repetitive kind of interests and activities. And these qualities are like the main characteristic of autism, and these usually impair on the individual's normal functioning, and it impacts this child or adult in all situations of life. So autism is quite prevalent in the UK, and some people may argue that it's overdiagnosed, but actually, because about 10, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, the prevalence was a lot less than it is now. But actually, in retrospect, when you look at some adults today and realize that, oh, actually, they have autism, so you think about the misdiagnosis. But because, like I said, the definitions of autism vary a lot and it has changed so much over the years. So now you have this autism spectrum of disorder, which sort of encompasses all these various diagnoses. So it's quite prevalent in the UK. So about 1 in 100 people in the UK suffer from autism, and that translates to about 700,000 people. So that's a lot of people, and it's more prevalent in boys than girls. So boys are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls are. But there's also this confounding factor, in the sense that girls tend to shy away from expressing themselves, and it's more difficult to diagnose in girls than boys. And there's also a tendency for autism to run in families, but there's no known like pattern of inheritance. So for sickle cell, for example, you can say, oh, it's a recessive condition. So if both parents have it, the child can have it, or it can be transmitted. But with autism, it's not known. There's also apparently a lower prevalence in Black and minority ethnic groups. But why is that? Do we actually have a lower prevalence, or what are we missing? And there have been a lot of studies to try to figure out why we have seemingly lower prevalence. But actually, the main problem is that there are quite a few challenges in diagnosing autism in Black and minority groups for various reasons. So the first problem is challenges in getting a diagnosis. And with our kids going to school, sometimes people have a stereotype of what they expect Black kids to look like or Asian kids to look like. And so sometimes teachers fail to spot the problem. Sometimes in these communities as well, there's the lower understanding, because it's not something that most of us are very familiar with. So there might be the not very good understanding of levels of autism. And so getting a diagnosis sometimes is even a problem. There's also lots of problems with accessing support to services. Sometimes language barrier could be a problem, lack of translation services. And there's also a lack of awareness of autism, which is why I really commend Clarice for trying to organize this session to try to talk about autism, especially in our communities. So that one of the main problems is lack of awareness and understanding of autism. And there's also one of the most challenging bits, that of denial and isolation. So some families are really in denial of the diagnosis and actually feel isolated when they tend to have this diagnosis made. So what causes autism? So until this day, you'd be surprised, but it's unclear what causes autism. But there are several genetic syndromes, so that they're genetic problems. Like genetic problems are just problems that could be something wrong with somebody's DNA. They're quite rare disorders. Sickle cell is also a genetic problem. For example, I give the example of sickle cell because I know most of us would have known about it. So it's most often the cause is unknown, but in very, very, very rare cases, there are sometimes some other genetic syndrome associated with it. And when a diagnosis of autism is made, the clinicians involved, as the doctors, they try to decide if this child needs further genetic testing. It's not done for everybody, but depending on how they assess and the degree of autism and other associated factors, like it could be epilepsy associated or any other things, that the doctors could decide, oh, should we try to see if maybe some other syndromes are associated. But it's important to note that it's not caused by bad parenting, it's not caused by diet, it's not caused by infections, and it's not caused by vaccines. So these theories have all been debunked. And it's also important to know that autism starts from a child is born with autism. It may be diagnosed later in adulthood, but it's not something that develops when a child is 2 or 3. The main problem would be in diagnosis, as I'm going to talk about later, but children with autism are born with autism, and that's just how their brain functions. Their brain functions differently. So talking about how to spot autism in your child. So it's going to depend on the age of the child. So if you have a young child, like by 2, 3 years, you expect the child to respond to their name, like look into your eye, smiling back at you, all those especially social and communication skills that you expect children to have by those ages. So if you feel like your child is not meeting them, or they're very particular about certain types of things like smell, taste, odor, or they like repetitive movements, or they avoid playing with other children, or not playing around other children, or just being repetitive with maybe toys or phrases or words, those could be some signs of autism. There are other things to think about, but autism is one of them. And I suppose, because we're talking about autism, it's important to mention all of these. So in older kids sometimes, and even in adults, some of the signs that you can get of autism would be maybe not being able to understand what other people are thinking or feeling. You're just finding it hard for them to express themselves, how they feel. Sometimes they like to have a strict daily routine, or sometimes they get very upset when their routine changes. And just finding it hard to make friends, and they just prefer being on their own. Sometimes it's just how people are. But if you're worried about autism, these are the kind of things to think about. So in terms of, so when you think about it, kids with autism or adults with autism, it's important to know that, like I said, it can be diagnosed at any age, but it's something that people are born with. And it's a spectrum of diseases, it's a spectrum of conditions. Sorry, I keep calling it diseases, but that's the wrong term. So it's not a disease, it's just a different way in which their brains are wired. So it's important to know that people with autism can live a full life. Sometimes they need help with things like relationships, jobs, school, and the kind of help they need depends on how high functioning they are. So some need a lot of help, really, and some don't really need extra support. Some can do without, but it's usually important to have this support available. So like I said, it's the people fall on very wide spectrum, so could be very different. And you have lots of people go about in society, look normal, behave normal, have jobs, as CEOs are very intelligent scientists, and they have autism, and you wouldn't know. So sometimes it's hard to tell, and it takes a lot of analyzing and assessing and breaking down into their background, their history, developmental history, to be able to come up with this. And so autism is not an illness. It's just a condition in which people differ from how their brain processes information. And they also have various levels of intelligence. Some have mild learning difficulties, some even have severe learning difficulties, especially if they have other associated problems. And like they can also have other anxiety, depression, they can have epilepsy. Like I said, they can also have some other genetic problems. So how is ASD diagnosed? So when we clinicians try to diagnose ASD, the first thing is we try to decide to see if what the child's development is like, and whether there are other associated conditions like I've mentioned earlier. And the main things that we look at is the degree or severity of dysfunction of social communication, and the degree of impairment with respect to the kind of behaviors like restrictive or repetitive patterns of behavior. And we sort of try to put them in 3 levels, like those who require support, if they require substantial support, or very substantial support, which sort of helps us decide how much this condition affects them and how much support they need. So usually you'd need pediatricians. So you need community pediatricians. You might need a pediatric neurologist. You need child and adolescent psychiatrists. You need an educationist. You need clinical psychologists. You need occupational therapists, amongst other professionals. So it's you need is multidisciplinary kind of management for kids with suspected autism. So we have several diagnostics tools that we use. I'm not going to go into the details of all of them. So we have the DISCO tool, the ADOS tool, ADI. And the main thing about them, like I said, is some of them assess the now, like look at the current state of the child or the adult and try to determine if they've got autism. And some of them look right from the birth of the child, the developmental history, trying to assess if they actually have autism or if they have other coexisting problems. So if you think your child has got autism, what can you do? How can you get help? First point of contact. So for children under 5 years old, they have a health visitor. Talk to your health visitor. Talk to your GP. If there's any other health professional your child sees, maybe a therapist, the hospital, a pediatrician for some reason, or special needs education staff at your child's school, talk to them. Usually they'll know how to signpost you. I can't give a very straightforward kind of pathway because it differs by region. For those of us who work here, it's different from those who work down south, for example. So, so just speak to the professionals around you. And it's important to have a list of signs and symptoms of autism that you think your child may have. It's important to ask people who you think know your child very well, like close friends, close family, maybe teachers at school. Sometimes the teachers will actually tell you, like, we've noticed this about this child. And sometimes when you go for your appointment, it's good to take a child that, some other person that knows the child very well. And there's lots and lots of support because autism is so common. There's lots of support available for kids with autism. It's important to get diagnosed because you ask, is there any point labeling my child with a diagnosis? But then getting the diagnosis of autism is not. I like to tell people, don't see it as labeling your child, but it's important to know because it helps the parents and carers to understand the child's needs better, or even for adults. And there's always a better outcome for the child if they have this support available at an early age. So when autism is diagnosed, there's a lot of support in place. In the UK, because of limited resources, it's not always immediately available, but they are available and they eventually become available. But you the parent as well, you can start. There's lots of websites. There's an Autism Society website, lots of websites. You can start reading yourself and trying to see how to prepare your child while waiting for the formal support services to be available. So you can get help from the GP, from school, from the health visitor, even with social services. And sometimes you could be eligible for financial help. So it's just good to find out and make sure you get signposted, go to the right websites. And thank you very much for your time. If there's any questions, I suppose we can always talk about. I'll be happy to hand over to my other speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judwin. Thank you so much for that brilliant information you've shared there. One of the things which I've picked up is the fact that it's important to get your child diagnosed. I know some parents do look at the diagnosis as labeling your child. Some actually say if we label cans of food, bottles of drinks, why should we label a child? And as Dr. Judwin has said, diagnosis is not a label. It's a way of you knowing what exactly is happening with your child, and having a diagnosis will also give you the opportunity or the chance to be able to get more services, to be able to get more support for your child out there. So thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. And if you are watching and you have any questions, please do put them here so that at the end of our discussion we will be able to get back to the to our guest speakers to be able to answer them. And thank you once more. Yes, you've talked about diagnosis, so now we are going to talk to a parent. who has massive experience as far as her child is concerned. Sandra will tell us about her personal experiences and challenges in seeking a diagnosis for her child and how it has impacted her as an individual, her family, and also the community. Sandra, you're welcome once more, and please introduce yourself, and we are waiting for your presentation. Thank you.
On this afternoon. I'm really, really grateful because, as you rightly said, I have one of my sons. I've got 4 sons, and the third son is the one who has autism. He is almost 21 now. So, for me, I say that being a parent and having someone with autism is a ministry. I call mine a ministry, and I'm just so grateful to God for allowing me to have my son. I've listened to the doctor, and I got so much from her, and a lot of questions, came to mind as she was talking. My son is 21 now, so at the time when we had our diagnosis, it was very different from the diagnosis that they now give or how diagnosis is done. Because at the time when I wanted to get a diagnosis for my son, I myself did not know anything about autism. I'd never heard the word autism. So getting the diagnosis was a real shock to me. And when the diagnosis was given to me, it was just like, okay, this is what your son has. So now go and just do what you can for your son, whereas now, when you do get a diagnosis, we now have the EHC plan. You have other professionals that are involved with your child. But at the time for me, it was nothing like that. Everything didn't just come together like a package. You had to actually go and fight. I had to do a lot of workshops. I had to go to lots of workshops to know more about the condition. And I'm so glad that when doctor was speaking, she kept mentioning a disease, but then she corrected herself, because that is one of the reasons why a lot of us as parents, most of us or some of us that I know personally or I've worked with because of what I now do, don't like, they don't like to admit that their child has autism, because now we're correcting ourselves. But at the time when my son was younger, we used to call it an illness, and still some people do, because when someone's trying to describe you or let somebody know about you, they just say, oh, that lady whose son is sick. So at my time, it was really hard getting diagnosis. It was shocking for the whole family. It was an embarrassment, because when you were out in a community, people would look, and because you yourself is learning to accept what you've been told about your child, you didn't actually know how to confidently express or explain to others around you that, look, this is what my son has. And, I would appreciate if you don't stare at me, but rather help me or be nice to me, because people will look at you and they will just pity you and think that, okay, it's because you did something wrong, or how did this happen to you? These sort of things only happen to people who maybe have done something wrong, or they've done something bad to someone, and so it's like a curse or a punishment. So it was hard in my time when my son was growing up, and it affected my other children, because I have 5 of them, and he's the 4th born. So for the rest of them, it was a real there was a lot of pressure, because they had to explain to their friends every time they were out with their brother, that okay, this is what my brother has, and it's not that my brother is crazy or he's a naughty boy, or he's just uncontrolling, but this is the condition that he has, and so that's why he behaves the way he does. And so a lot had to be put in to my other children for them to be confident themselves, to be able to walk, with their head up high when they're out with their brother and not have people stare at them. So it even came to a point where if especially his younger brother, because there's one, I have one other son after him who's now going to be 20. So they are very close because they're only like a year and some months apart. So whenever his younger brother would take him out, he would always tell his friends beforehand that, okay, I'm coming with my brother. He has autism. And if he behaves in a way which to you is inappropriate, it's because of his autism. And that actually made my son, the younger one, become so mature, so confident. And through his brother, he actually made more friends, and people saw him to be a very wise young man, confident, not afraid, not ashamed to, be out with his older brother. So for us as a family, there was a lot we had to go through. And I think that if you don't have the right supportive network around you, as a family or as an individual, a single parent who is taking care of someone with autism, it can be really hard and very, you can feel isolated, lonely, and like we're talking about stigma and labeling. There's a lot of labeling, and which is still going on, but not as much as my time, especially in our community, because education is still needed. And I'm so happy that now there's more awareness and we're talking about this, and others are also talking about it in a different way, because people still have this notion that, autism is, if you have autism, you're crazy, you're mad, or, people just look at you in a different way. But for me, someone who has autism, or even me as a parent, I've learned so much through my son. I've actually made a lot of friends, and we're more confident as a family. And the challenges that I faced when he was younger, I'm now able to share that with moms or parents that are now coming up with, younger children on the spectrum. And rather than me sort of like pity party them, I always speak the positive. So no matter what you've been told about your child, for me, it's an open door for you to be able to, reach something more higher and greater because of the confidence I have. But my time, who could you talk to? No one, because you don't know whether if they were going to spread your conversation that you wanted to have with them, or are they going to give you some, are they going to encourage you not to be pitying yourself or not to be worried or afraid? So it was really hard, but now I'm just so happy and glad that, we talk more about autism, and there are so much help out there. And from what Dr. Said, there are a lot of questions I would like to ask, or, for us to be for us to discuss as the program is going on. So I would just reserve some of the questions that came to my mind when Doctor was talking, so that we can perhaps discuss that a little bit more later. And I'll hand back to you, AC.
Thank you so much for that, Sandra. And yes, um, in those days, we were not often told what to do when your child is being given an autism diagnosis. My son is 15, and some of the things I read today, and including what the doctor has said, I hear them as something new, because I wasn't really told. Some of them we've had to do further studies in order to learn more about autism. We never knew anything about DSM-5 and the criteria, apart from the fact that I had to do a postgraduate in autism and Asperger. And yes, some parents will go and do further studies in order to understand exactly what is happening with their child, S- but some won't, and not everyone has that privilege to study to understand more. So we need avenues, we need areas, places where parents as well will have to be taught what exactly that condition is, what they have to look out for as well. One of the things that listening to you, Sandra, is the fact that you said having an autism diagnosis should be an open door for you to be able to reach something higher and greater. That's very powerful because that comes with acceptance. Once you accept your child's condition, you start looking at the positives in that situation and not the negatives anymore. And Sandra also mentioned that at first she was still learning to understand her son's condition, and at the same time learning to understand why people will be looking at her son doing whatever he was doing. So as the years go by, parents are also learning to accept, and then the community is also doing their best. But we still need more from the community. We still need more support for parents. And one of the areas in the community where we need more support from is the church. And we have Father Dominic today. It's really a privilege having him. Father Dominic is the parish priest of St. Bede's Church here in Basingstoke. So, Father will be able to talk about autism in the wider community and what role the church has to play in supporting autistic individuals and their families in the community. Over to you, Father, and welcome once more.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Judwin. Thank you, Sandra. It's quite an eye-opener listening to the two of you beyond the experiences, beyond the knowledge shared. The fact that we're on this platform to talk about this family of ours, which the church recognizes as gifts, label or no label. The church recognizes anybody with disability as a gift to the society. A gift because they are different, they're special, different because they're not, like I heard doctor says, they are wired differently. There is a premium put on that fact that they are wired, we're the same. Like Dr. equally pointed out, some of them, especially those of them with Asperger's, they have done incredibly well in different fields of life. The weakness in this whole spectrum being a developmental disorder is a fact that understanding it took time. When we began to understand this developmental disorder, the church also began to understand it like every other person in the society. So the church, in her part, has done not as one will say excellently well. When I use the church, please, I use it guidedly to mean the Catholic Church. So if you belong to another church here, don't take offense. I am a Catholic and I'm speaking from that perspective. One of the things, the first step the church take or is taking or has taken to recognize, to partner, to stand with parents, and to make sure that these special gifts, these talents we have, are seen not as people who have disease, they are only different, is the fact that in the church there are documents prepared to guide how they can be fully accepted, for them to participate actively in the life of the church and the community. Different dioceses, different parishes have a directorate where there is some little bits and pieces put together for disabled people generally. However, parishes go ahead to step them down based on the needs. Like doctor said, one in probably 100 is autistic, one may have pervasive disorder. It could differ from one community to the other. So there's no blanket directives as to how everybody must do it. However, the church supports the family, one, in education. So for parishes that have schools attached to the parish, there is a concrete step put in place, activated, where you have a child with some special need. Teachers are employed, specialists are put there to cater to see how such children with such special needs are carefully guided, protected, and led like every other child in that school. The next is to help the child to integrate normally, seamlessly into the community, such that the curriculum is stepped down in such a way that the child who probably has PDD, Asperger's, or any of these childhood integrative disorder, whatever you doctors call it, they often try to make sure that some of the text or the curriculum is tailored to the child's need, and a special teacher or someone is asked to guide this child to arrive at knowledge, to arrive at understanding. Beyond the school, if a parish recognizes some needs like this, there is often the fear. Parents are too unsure. There is like there's this shame they don't want to be associated with to bring the child to the church. But if you parents have the courage and the presence of mind to trust that the community will welcome and accept this child, especially for the child to go through the rites of initiation, baptism, First Holy Communion, confirmation, the sacrament of reconciliation, the sacrament of the holy oils, these are all put in place. Sometimes parents are too anxious, unsure. How will the child be prepared? I'll just share with you a quick example. When I was the parish priest in St. Swithin's, somewhere down the road in Yateley, this family approached me saying their child is autistic. And I said, so where's the problem? Bring him. Do you want us to have one-on-one preparation for the child to do his First Holy Communion? They said yes. And I said, suppose you bring him, let him meet the other group. They were hesitant. But when I said it is just one-off, we will go on with the one-on-one, they agreed. They turned up with this child. To our greatest amazement, all the children swooped on this boy. His name is called Matteo. Matteo became the star of the group preparing for First Holy Communion. Thereafter, the parents never agreed to one-on-one. They brought the child every time we had the sacramental program. Now, beyond this surprise, one of the girls whose brother was doing the First Holy Communion, she did hers the previous year, decided to adopt Matteo. Every time we had the program, she was there. She would prepare whatever we are going to teach, whatever we are going to discuss, pictorially. She puts some in pictures, some she sings. She's found something about Mateo that none of us understood early and took it on herself to be his mentor and brought this story to me. Before now, the parents were hesitant. When they finally agreed, Mateo was no longer their child. Mateo became the community's child. This little girl, unfortunately, I can't remember her name now, but adopted him and made the difference. When we did the first Holy Communion at the end of the day, Mateo's name was all over the whole place. No child went away without having a photograph taken with him, making faces. It was just one of the best sacramental programs I have prepared. Beyond this story is the fact that other sacraments are meant to integrate these gifts we have as autistic children. Beyond this, be it confirmation, please, if you're a Catholic, don't be too shy. Don't feel excluded. Don't feel anybody going to stigmatize you. Don't think that anybody's going to label you and your child. Walk up to the priest, put your request. A support group will be put in place to help you. Finally, there are other sacraments that, say for instance, the sacrament of reconciliation, which presupposes that before you approach the priest, you may have accused yourself of some sins and you want to be confessed and tell God you're sorry through the priest. Sometimes we think these gifted children of ours, because they are wired differently, have no sense of sin. They do. Though not all, some who are severely affected or less developed are likely unable to articulate, say what they think. However, however, don't be too laid back, held back, shy to say your child may not be able to say anything to the priest. Allow him. Let there be a prior preparation. If he's not severely developed or underdeveloped, he may be able to express what he feels are things he or she has done wrong and needs to be reconciled. So it is that sacrament that I know can be a bit of touch and go or a bit difficult. Finally, for me, when I see families shy away because they have a child with some disability, you are actually excluding the church from the life of the child. There are programs, there are systems, there are opportunities put in place to have our children integrate, grow, and become part of the community like any other child. Again, my emphasis is that these children, autistic, Asperger's, or whatever spectrum in which they fall into, they are gifts to us, and the church so underscores. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That was brilliant. That was whew, touching. Thank you so much, Father. Thank you. Thank you. I think Lesra will have to go for his communion um, doctrine very soon. Thank you so much for that. And as you've said, there are systems put in place to support our autistic children, our autistic individuals, and Mateo became the community's child. That was a brilliant to add to that. It takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a child with autism to raise the consciousness of that village. And I'm impressed of what happened to Mateo and how much he was embraced into the church and again in the community. And I would also like other parents to do same, bring forth your children, take them to church. Father said, do not be shy, do not be laid back, because our children have potentials which sometimes if you don't try, if you don't take them places, if you do not take them out, you will not know what they are capable of doing. They will surprise you. My son played golf yesterday, and I had no idea that he could concentrate that much to look at the ball and try to target to send it inside that hole. If you don't put your child out there to try activities, to do things, you will never know what they are capable of doing. Thank you so much once more, Father. And I also want to thank each and every one of you for watching, and all the contributions and all the comments and the questions. Keep bringing them in and keep sharing, because today this is a very important topic which we are discussing today, and it is touching each and every one of us, whether you have an autistic child or not. That said, I am going to go over to Eric. The child belongs to our community, and that community also has something to do with school. Eric, I'd like you to take over, and you know what you have to do. Just do your thing, and welcome once more.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Nice to be part of this panel. My name is Eric Moor, and I'm someone who is very passionate working with children and families to ensure that there is progress being made, there's awareness being made, and there is joy in the community living as members of that community. So I just want to look at my perspective in this discussion today is to look at how the children with autism can be supported in the school or within the community. So in the UK, it's very different from different areas. In America, they have different patterns or structures that they use to support these children. In the UK, a common structure which is being used in schools is called SPELL. We use SPELL. And SPELL, the initial part, SPELL is just an abbreviation. It stands for structure. And every parent who has an autistic child will confirm that structure is very paramount in their day-to-day life. And not just for autistic individuals, for everyone, structure is very important. I just know, even in my house, my daughter will always tell me to put my shoe in the right place. I think she just needs some structure. And once in a while, I also tell her to put her plates to the sink or beside the sink or something like that. So the structure is very paramount. And then the second part is positivity. And you discover that having a positive approach, working with children with autism is very, very crucial. Most of the children I've worked with, it is very important not to use words like no, not to stop them from doing things, give them choices. Always be able to divert attention from what you don't want them to do to what you want them to do, or what they don't want to do to what they have to do, things like that. And then you have this empathy. Empathy is actually to be in their shoes. Being in their shoes is very hard because you discover that most of these young people have different they have the senses. It's either hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity. Sometimes it's too loud or too low. And we just had a discussion, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, with one of the panel members who said it's just like imagining a child in a community of different sounds and they pick all those sounds at the same time. So you discover that empathy means getting into the mind of the child and then try to think of why a child closes both ears like this, even when the noise you hear is quite low. It's because the child is not getting that noise. The child is getting every other noise. I was just with one a couple of days ago, and we're walking down the street, and it was very, very noisy. And I could hear a lot of sounds from cars and people. But he was able to hear the sound of a bird. And I was saying that it's quite squeaky. So it picks the child will pick every other thing, and it's quite disturbing. So when you can identify those aspects in their lives and how it impacts on their well-being, it will be very easy for us to support. Then in that spell, the other one is L. You have the link. You have to make some link with they call it pointers, areas where you think help can come from. In the UK, there are lots of places for help. If you just go online, you will see lots of places that can offer help. National Autistic Society is one of them. MenCap is another one. I think mostly for adults, but also for young people. But there are many others. And there's a lot of support around. But because the platform in which we are, I think it goes around the world. There are also support. I come from Cameroon, and there are support systems in Cameroon. There are schools, and there are people who can help. Very often, if you cannot get those access those facilities, you can always get a link from Clarice. She's doing a very good job, and very often through her, you can always get link, even in your country, even if you are not from Cameroon. She can always know how to get to someone in your country for help. And then in the spell, the other one is they call it low arousal. Most of the children, when I hear definitions, I was very proud of the definition that the doctor gave. But most of the things that parents will say is that their children are having tantrums. I hate that word. I really do. When you say they are having tantrums, it's as if they are doing something. The word is quite negative, but it is just a behavior, and that behavior is because of a reason. So low arousal means being able to identify triggers, what happens before they reach that point of getting or falling apart. I don't want to use the one that people commonly use as well. They commonly say meltdown, but I see it like breaking down the way all of us do. I don't know why we see others like meltdown and we call ours breakdown. So if we look at that structure, very often in the schools, it is quite structured, it's quite orderly, and then it helps a lot of children to cope in the academic environment. And then when parents in the homes, they work with schools, they give them also that spell to be able to make that link between the school and the home. And I will pray. I was very happy that Father was able to join today. And I'm so proud that the church makes a very big impact. I'll pray that this link between the families, the school, should also transcend to the church, so that the priest or the church and other members of the church will know how to manage the spell, so that the child gets that structure, because the most important thing for that child is all about structure. I would just like to point out that we noticed in the past that doctors, other specialists in the medical field, they really have very little knowledge about autism, because they're clinicians. They are mostly trained to heal. And now they are working with children who have conditions. And because of that, they have started training learning disability specialists all over the country in the UK. And the interest is for them to be able to bridge that gap between GPs and families of children with autism. And the reason is that when they give talks to those specialists, it is very easy for them to meet the needs of those children. And the simple reason is that when Doctor was talking, he mentioned that she was talking about disease. I think very often the reason why people liken autism to disease is not the autism itself, because autism is just a condition. But the reason is that most, by the way, statistics shows that 92% of children with autism, they also have other condition, which is like an illness. I had this discussion with Clarice like 4 years ago when we talk about comorbidity. So we discovered that most of the children will be able to, it is very easy for them to get epilepsy, diabetes, and other health conditions. And because of that, it is very easy to identify the disease than the condition, because the disease is what actually shows. And that is why if you look at some of the Clarice's posts on her website, you will discover that once you see her, you see her son. There's no difference. In fact, for me, very often Clarice looks the one who has a problem, who has a condition, than the child. And the reason why I'm saying that is because once you cannot see autism. So what people see is what they tend to look at as an issue. And very often when you see these children with autism, when you see them having seizures, that is what people associate the condition with. And then they are looking at that like a disease. I just thought I should point out that because when other people make that as a fact that, oh, it's a disease, we should be able to help them and point to that angle so that they see that it's not a disease at all, but it's a condition. However, they can have other illnesses or diseases like any other person. Now, I wanted just to point out what the UK has tried to do for families, which will help every other family. What they have tried to do is that they have open sectors. There is something, I don't know if you can write it down, they call it Restore 2 Mini. Restore, then 2, and then Mini. That has been a program that has been initiated to prepare families to be able to access very good help when they meet the doctor or a clinician and they are able to sell what their child is suffering from. You know, one of the big problems is that most parents, they don't know when they take the child who is not well and they go to the hospital, they cannot express what is actually wrong. Reason being that the child cannot express himself or herself. However, there is, in this Restore 2 Mini, they call it ways of identifying deterioration with children with autism. And the Restore 2 Mini is, they have an abbreviation that they use. They call this abbreviation SBAD. The SBAD is an abbreviation that is very easy to manage because it just gives you, the first one, it gives you the situation. And the situation means you are telling the person you meet, the clinician, if it's your GP, you're actually telling your GP what the situation is. I don't know if that one is clear. If you know about the situation, for instance, you go and tell the GP what you have seen in your child, what is happening. So you give the situation. Then the B, you are talking about the background, which means how the child was. And then you have the A, which is about the attitude. You are pointing out what is happening now. And then you are talking about the assessment. They will be talking of how you have assessed the child. If, for instance, this child used to get up very early in the morning every day at 5 o'clock, and then now you realize that the child gets up at 8, something should be wrong. You have to check. And then when you have done this check, when you give this to the doctor, to a clinician, they'll be able to say, oh, yes, it is something we can look at. Or what did you find? You say, oh, no, the child could not sleep on the left side. Okay, it is something to check that left side. Or the child was hitting his head or her head on the wall. Then we'll say, oh, let us check if there is headache or there is tummy ache or there's something wrong with the feet. But you have to be able to give an order of what you have explored, what you have experienced, from the situation to the assessment. If you give that order, which they call the SBAR, somebody will be able to follow the structure and give you the help you need. The reason why I say this is because there's a lot of negative feedback from parents when they go to the hospital because they think they don't get the right help. We are actually going to the hospital to meet clinicians, doctors, rather than going to meet people who have who read your mind, and they cannot read the mind of those kids. So once you go and you cannot sell what you think the child is going through, the doctor will guess what can be wrong and give you that help from the guesswork. However, if you give a very, very good picture of what the child is going through, the better the picture, the easier it is for the help you get. So this program has been used for the past 2 years in Watford and around Manchester, and it is working quite well. And they're going to sell it out through the whole country. And I think in other countries, that is what our parents who have children with autism should do. Try to identify the way the child is, and if there's a change, you try to see how you can understand that change, and then you just relate it to someone, to a specialist, to give you some help. The reason is the earlier you do it, the less chances of taking the child to the hospital when the situation is worse. And the only reason why this thing started is because there has been a research 11 years ago which showed that most of the children with autism and learning disability, they die a lot more when they reach the hospital because they bring them there late. During the time they're having conditions, parents cannot deal with it, but they're just trying to calm it down. However, if you can identify a change and then you take the child to the hospital, it will be very easy for the child to get the support they need earlier enough. Sometimes calling your GP and explain it the way it is, rather than just saying that my child is not well and I don't know what is troubling the child. Your GP cannot help. You take the child to the hospital, they can actually do all the scans and everything, and they will not actually find what is wrong. However, if you can identify, if you can discuss change in behavior, they can do some other routine type of test, and they'll be able to help you. I don't know whether I've made any sense today, but I wish and I hope that the information I share can be taken seriously, because most of these are our children. We need to actually work with them to the best of our ability, because every parent, every community member is an advocate. If that child doesn't come to your house one day when the child used to come every day, it is high time we go to that neighbor, we knock the door, we ask, hey, how is this one? I didn't see him today. I didn't see her today. And they can tell you that, oh, she has just been sitting indoor, and they say, oh, there might be a problem. Let us check with the doctor. Doing those things, you don't know the change you can make. Thank you very much. I hope I've not spoken for a very long time.
Thank you so much, Eric. And yeah, thank you so much for saying that I look more like I'm the one having the condition. I didn't forget that. Thank you so much. And yes, if you've learned something just from listening to Eric, it should be spell and it should be SBAR. Spell is structure, positive approach, empathy, link, low arousal, or identifying triggers. SBAR is you have to look at the situation, the background, the attitude, and the assessment. I can't explain everything, but I but I got that. So thank you so much. And these acronyms, you will use that to be able to identify SBAR. You'll be able to use it to identify deterioration in a child. And then the spell, you will use spell to help you to support your child at home, in the community, and everywhere that you take your child to. This has been a brilliant discussion and it's still ongoing. Thank you so much once for everyone for your input. And let's have a little look at some of the comments and questions. I will look at the very first one where Judith Gang said she's just wondering if autism existed 40 years ago. It looks like even if it was there, the rate has drastically increased. What do we think? I had a discussion with someone a couple of months ago where he was for the opinion that he's not sure that before the 90s there was autism. And because he says in nursing homes you hardly see anyone there with anyone who is autistic, that is in elderly care homes. So what can we say about that? Anyone? Dr. Eric, Sandra, Father?
Right. So that's a good question. That's my mom actually. Just so you know. Anyway, so it's a very good question. In my talk or presentation, I did mention that it does seem like um, we're diagnosing autism a lot more. But like I said to you, so if you think about the history of autism, so before it used to be a disease. So, and it was only the most severe of cases that were ever diagnosed, like maybe a child who was really, really non-verbal, really, really stuck to their repetitive kind of movements. Because with kids with severe autism, sometimes they have it significantly obvious, and sometimes it's not that obvious either. So, like I said earlier, there's been a change in the diagnostic criteria. It's the same with most other illnesses, it's not just for autism. So many other illnesses, obviously, if you're not if you don't have if you're not diagnosing it or looking for it, you don't see it. So it's not. It seems like there's been a drastic increase in autism over the years, but it's more of the diagnostic criteria changing and people being more aware. So one of the things that we study as pediatricians is the development of children. And if children are not, so we expect kids to meet their milestones by the time they get to certain ages. And if kids are not meeting those milestones for some reason, then we try to investigate to see if there's a reason, Oh, and usually, and the most common reason sometimes is autism. But like I said, the main reason why we seem to see a lot more autism now is because of a change in the diagnostic criteria, which sort of puts it on the spectrum, and that's why the term autism spectrum disorder came to life.
Yeah, just to add to that, that was very good because when we began this discussion, doctor actually gave a definition for autism, and she talked. Sorry for saying he. She talked of the DSM-5. We started with 1 and 3 and then 5. You will discover that if you check that definition, it has changed over time, and it changes over time because of the change in the group of people they consider to be autistic. And just like the last word she just mentioned, talks of the umbrella term, it is because they have added a lot of conditions which were not regarded as autistic before are being considered autistic now. Even now, what we are calling, there are some of the conditions which were very separate, but now they are under the umbrella. Yeah, that was the word. So they brought all under one umbrella. However, when you look at even the process of doing the testing, 40 years ago, the facilities to do the testing, there were very few. Right now, there are quite many. And the tools to use to do the testing to confirm if a child has autism, there are quite many now. And then with now, the population 40 years ago is a lot more than 40 years ago. Because of that, the more we are giving birth, the more children with different conditions will be seeing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. Eric, someone actually said, Fournier Delphine, she said, wrong diagnosis caused my child to suffer. And right now I'm still suffering from the effect. I'm sure Delphine will be able to tell us more about that. Maybe there's someone listening, there's someone watching who will be able to help her more because she's based in Cameroon. And Belle Sonki, she said, okay, she's actually answering the comment of Mrs. Ngang Judith. Okay, that it was known
Yeah.
in Cameroon, they will tell parents the child was a snake child, take them to the riverside so they can go back. Medically, there was ignorance in families too, and families too did not help the situation as okay. That's good. And doctor also mentioned that why there's a drastic increase in autism diagnosis is awareness. Yes, many people are becoming more aware and understanding more about what autism is, and so they are now seeking the more parents are actually going out there to seek a diagnosis for their children. We even have adults who are actually going now and seeking for a diagnosis, because the more they are becoming aware, the more they are questioning certain things that have been happening to them in the past, and looking for a diagnosis will be able to answer those questions they've probably been asking about themselves, or about their maybe social interactions or communications in the past. And another, Fonye Delphine, she said, my daughter is 10 years and not talking. She has autism and cerebral palsy. I wish to know if she will still talk.
Can I answer that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Just to encourage the parent who's written this, message. My son didn't start talking till he was 10. I was told that he would never have any speech. Now, what I always tell parents is that don't focus so much on him, on her not talking. Because when you focus so much on that, you forget about all the other positiveness that she has, all the good things that she's able to do. And with me, the day my son spoke, it was actually the bus who brought him from school and said, "Oh, he made a lot. He spoke a lot today." And I was like, yeah, because for us as parents, when they're making sounds, that's not talking. But now I've realized that that is a form of, communication.
Yeah.
You don't have to brush it aside if they're making noises, or you're not verbally saying any words. So when he actually said, "Mom," everybody in the house just gathered together. We were shouting. I was shaking, because this is somebody who have just been, he just makes noises, no speech, nothing, and now he's saying, "Mom." And I started to cry, because I realized that in all his noise making, and we used to think that he was just being too noisy, being too distracted. It was actually his way of talking to me. We thank God he's able to speak. He has minimum speech, but now he's able to say words, a few, sentences together, and that took 10 years. So what I would tell you as a parent is, don't focus so much about her not having the actual speech. Look at what she's good at. And when you stop focusing on that, and you just keep persisting in how you can support her to be a better, daughter, to progress and to further herself in all the other abilities, God will surprise you. So you're saying you wish to know if she will still talk. Only God knows. And I know that whatever your daughter has, or whatever it is, she has a lot more abilities in her than just the one thing that you're focusing on. So be encouraged. And also, just to quickly add to what the question about the late diagnosis, like the 40 years ago, Sister AC, I always post your every time you put something on your post, I share it on mine. And me and one of the parents were actually discussing about a post that you posted a couple of days ago about the signs to look out in adults that have autism. And we were laughing that, in fact, maybe my husband has autism. Because some of the things that you had listed, like being anxious when things don't go right. And we were just laughing on the phone that, wow. So possibly a lot of our, not just the guys, but a lot of our men, or a lot of people that we know have autism, and we probably didn't know. Those days, like my brother said, the resources to diagnose was not there. So like doctor said, it was just, the one that was very physical that were being diagnosed. But we also associated it with, spiritual, like the church will link it to it being some kind of a demonic attack, or you've been cursed, because I went through that with my son. And until people realize that it's got nothing to do with demonized or something like that, people or those who have autism or associated disability will lose out, because straight away in our community, we always try to find a reason for everything. We don't look at why it's happening. We just want to pin it on something or have an excuse that, okay, this is the reason why it has happened that way. We need to bypass that and look at everything the way it is, so that the right support can be given from it all. Thank you.
Sandra,
And,
just
Thank
to
you so
add a little
much.
to that.
go
Sorry,
on.
AC, let me just add a little to what Sandra said, because we need to weave this together. That literature, scientific literature available, says something like 60 years actually ago was when they started diagnosing autism. So it goes beyond 40.
Yeah.
And we should understand that anthropology, understanding human being, just got better and better. In parts of Nigeria, where I happen to come from, twins were thrown into the river, hung on the trees to die because they are twins. It took a Scottish lady, a missionary, to say, no, twins are blessings. So I just want to say, time, technology, science has better our understanding of human conditions. And it's just going to get better and better. Thank you.
So, the to Miss Ponya Delphine, regarding her question. So, um, cerebral palsy is a completely different disease on its own. So, with cerebral palsy, unlike autism, it is a disease and it's in various stages. So, without really knowing, um, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that your daughter has the condition. I know it's very challenging to have cerebral palsy already, and then adding autism on it. But with cerebral palsy, like I said, it's in various stages from stage 1 to stage 5. Stage 5 is severe dysfunction, and stage 1 is like really a mild dysfunction. So, depending on what stage your daughter has, I suppose the best person to talk to would be your daughter's doctor. And sometimes, like Sandra said, it's hard to tell. You just have to go with the child and go with what they can do, their abilities, and trust in God if you're a believer of God. So, but I wish you all the best, and I hope you can find the answers. Like Sandra said, sometimes it's not about chasing the answers, and it's just about just taking the child as they come, and just giving them that support that they need. Thank you.
Sorry, just the last one on that. I just want to add that every child with autism can communicate. You don't have to talk. You can communicate. And if you have a child who is autistic, know that that child can communicate. You just have to get the right tools, the right people around you, and then you just have to be patient as well, because communication will be the key to everything that the child has to go through in life. If you have a child, even the one with cerebral palsy, it's not a problem. They can communicate. The thing is, if you are emphasizing on speech, that is a problem, because speech is just one form of communication. Just try to identify the best way to communicate. It can be using pictures, it can be using signs, it can be using sounds, it can be using the voice. Every way, every opportunity to communicate with that child, using your hands, using gestures, using pictures, using music, you'll discover that at some point the child will start communicating with you or any other person they come across. So forget about talk and concentrate on communication. You will discover that already maybe you have been communicating with your child for a very long time, but you want a voice to come out, which is not what you should concentrate on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And one of the things I've learned about autism is the fact that effective communication can actually take place without words. I remember a friend a couple of years ago was she was wondering how I do communicate with my son where he has no words. As long as they understand, as long as they can follow instructions, and you've found the right a tool or the right device or the right means of communication for them, then they can communicate. And the speech will come at some point. It may not come, but when it comes, it's a bonus. But as Eric said, every child with autism can communicate. We fail to know that they are communicating because we are looking for speech. We are looking for words. We want them to open their mouth and say something. Then we fail to listen to the sounds that they make, because each sound they make has a meaning. It may be shouting because they are angry. It may be shouting because of excitement, etc., etc. So once more, everyone, thank you so much for watching. We are gradually getting to the end of our show, and we still have a lot of comments here from those watching. And I'm just having a look. If there are questions, we will be able to answer. Otherwise, if you have a burning question, you could actually put it here for our guest speakers. Will be able to answer later on after our show. But we do appreciate each and every one of you for watching, for participating, for sharing, and also for liking, and most importantly, for bringing yourself here to learn about autism, a condition that some shy away from, a condition that doesn't discriminate. It doesn't mind if you are a white person, you're a black person, or it doesn't care whether you're from Cameroon or you're from Nigeria. If the condition has to affect an individual, it will. If it has to be in a certain family, it's going to be. Sometimes we ask questions, why me? Why my family? But at the same time, why not? Sandra said earlier that an autism diagnosis will open doors for you to reach higher and greater heights. We encourage each and every one of you, if you have a child or if you are an adult with autism, you should look at it that way, that it is an opportunity for you to reach greater heights. It may just be about raising awareness, encouraging acceptance, including people who are autistic. It makes a massive difference. So I just want to ask each and every one of you, do you have any question to ask each other? I think Sandra mentioned that she had a question to ask. If you have, then you can ask, and then we round up the show for today.
Yeah, I was when doctor was speaking earlier, and she was talking about the diagnosis and how the diagnosis is now done. I mean, like I said before, there's a lot more than what existed in my days, but still, I tend to get. I tend to hear from other parents that there's a lot of frustration to actually get the diagnosis because, like we've been discussing, there are more now. There are more now. There are more children now being diagnosed with autism, or autism is now. It's more. We are more aware of it now. So to actually get a diagnosis is becoming difficult for parents. Some parents have actually noticed that there is, something not right and they want to have it checked out, but then they're having a fight to actually have it done. So I just wanted to ask, doctor, what is the normal procedure? Because I have some parents who they've been to their GP, they've said that there is a problem. Then the GP is saying, okay, they're only the GP, they have to be referred to the specialist. Then there's a long waiting list, or the specialist will see them, but then they don't actually um, give the right report that the parent was expecting. So then they get very frustrated, and the schools are not doing what they're supposed to do because they don't have the diagnosis or the support needed to be able to help the child when they're of a school age. So what is the actual proper procedure that have to be taken, and can GPs do more than just say, okay, we will refer you? Because if these are not documented, as a parent, you're frustrated because you know your child more than even the professionals, and you just want confirmation. But because you are only a parent, it's very hard to actually get, the documentation that says and confirms that yes, your child has, the condition. So I just want to know, because I'm sure there are some parents listening to us who are probably facing what I'm asking.
Thank you very much. So that's a really good question, and so if you recall me saying, well, you might not. I always say that and it's wrong. Anyway, so it's very variable, and I understand it's very frustrating. Like, I meet a lot of parents who are really frustrated that they're unable to get access to professionals who can help them. So, like I said earlier, it's very variable. The referral pathways are very variable in the different regions. Each region has its pathway. So, I didn't find it very. I found it a bit pointless giving like the specific pathway in Nottingham, given that it doesn't apply to anybody who lives in Southampton or Oxford or wherever. But and we have to understand that GPs are professionals that have a very broad spectrum of work. So their role is not GPs. Diagnosing autism is not their role, because if you think about the GP see children, they see adults, they see psychiatric patients, they see cardiac patients, all sorts of patients. So when it comes, so they're not very like they're not. It's not their role to make specific diagnoses. They suspect a problem, then they have to refer. In Nottingham, for example, we've got paraclinical services. Like, they're not hospital based, but we've got normally the pathway for autism is community pediatrics. So community pediatrics that deals with children and makes this diagnosis. And I won't lie to you, as common as the diagnosis is, it's also a very, very short staffed service. So you'd imagine that sometimes it takes ages to get through to see a specialist, which is a bit of a shame. But I think the first challenge is that you notice your child has autism at an early age. Unfortunately, because there are certain milestones we expect children to achieve. So it's difficult to make a diagnosis below 18 months, and usually the cutoff age is 2 years. So sometimes you know that your child is 18 months old and it's not doing the right things, but you're unable to get through to a referral. In my area, 2 years old is a cutoff age for referral, because there's it's true that your child is a bit behind, but some kids are naturally behind, and you can't really talk about autism because without knowing if the kid definitely is deficient in this, in communication, for example. So I think that's the first challenge. Sometimes you're definite like this child probably has autism, but because the child has not reached that cutoff age, you're unable to get that referral. And there's also the problem of overstaffing, which is it's not it's a problem that's common to most NHS services. So, but I think one thing that I find useful with parents, like, is you need to push through. Like, I always tell parents, and I'll be very blunt here. Like, it's something that I find that most British white people know how to do very well. Like, they push through, they bother people, make sure that they get heard. But I think sometimes we tend to shy away from getting through to people or pushing. Like, if they say, "Oh, the waiting time is 18 months," and we just keep quiet. But I've seen some white people sometimes they push through so much, and everybody's like, "I need to get rid of this woman." So yes, there are waiting times, but use every channel available to you. Go through school, go through the GP, speak to the health visitor if your child is under 5. Like, just make sure you keep ringing them and pushing through, because in the end, you're the parent. And sometimes even health professionals do make mistakes. So you're the parent, and the fact is that you know better. So long and short, I'm not going to give you any particular. In my area, it's the GP referral. School can also refer, but it's not the hospital service. It's a community pediatric service that manages these children. I think maybe Eric may have something more to add because he works in school settings.
Thank you so much for that. I think Eric has just stepped out. I also, since there isn't any one particular procedure or steps to follow, don't you think there should be some sort of a SOP, like standard operating procedures to be used across the country?
Well, you could argue that the yeah, you could argue that for it makes sense to have a standard operating procedure, but the fact is that even for the hospital systems, like just outside of this discussion, for everything, the hospitals are not linked up at all. Like a woman can you can abuse a child in Southampton and move to Yorkshire and it doesn't get picked that this child is being abused because the hospitals, the systems are not linked.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just how the NHS functions.
Okay. Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Yeah. Um, did you have anything to add the to what Sandra asked, so we can round up?
Not really. It's just to say it is very difficult to diagnose. If you see from the comment from someone from Cameroon about a misdiagnosis, it is common everywhere, and because of that, most people take most clinicians they take a lot of time, even if they start identifying that there's a problem at the age of 18 months, 2 years. They try to investigate till around 3 years, 4, 5, sometimes, just to be absolutely sure that this is autism. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I've actually discovered that all along we've been talking about autism, and our conversation has geared so much towards children alone. Mind you, an autistic child will grow up into an adult with autism. I I just want to find out, maybe from Dr. Judwin, have you had circumstances where situations where an adult was contemplating a diagnosis, where they've actually spoken to you or to someone you know, but they're not too sure exactly what to do, but they do think that they have some autistic traits?
So not particularly. Can I just remind everyone that I'm a pediatrician, so I only deal with
Yeah.
children. So not I've seen with older kids it does happen. So because I deal with kids up to 18 sometimes. So
Mhm.
yes, with older kids it does happen that at school or maybe somewhere it gets picked up that they have concerns. But like you all have mentioned, many parents now are more aware. More so the Caucasian community, they're very aware that it could exist. And even sometimes the kid is 7, 8, 9, 10 years old and they think this kid is different. And they do
Mhm.
wonder if the kid has autism and they try to do everything to get referred. So I haven't seen adults because I don't work with adults, but I do know that there are cases where adults um, sometimes it's usually your environment that could point things out, that point with kids anyway. Usually the parents point things out, the teachers, make suggestions. So, but I'd imagine that it does happen for adults as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much. And I also do have adults who have, they had to go for a diagnosis because their children were being diagnosed as well. They had been seeing what has been happening with their children, and then at some point they said, you know what, I've got to take myself forward for a diagnosis because I think I have similar traits like my child. So I just want to thank you guys once more for your time, for the information you've shared. It's going to help many out there from today onwards. And we look forward to hearing from you again at some point. We've been talking about autism. We talk about autism, we have conversations on autism because autism happens to be one of those taboo topics which many do not really want to talk about it. They can talk about autism actually, but they don't want to mention their child who is autistic, because we are still struggling with accepting our children. So, which is one of the reasons why many will not want to talk. Unfortunately, another reason may be because parents are being stigmatized. The autistic individuals are being stigmatized or being discriminated upon in the communities, in the families, and as such, it people decide not to talk because they think it's no one else's business. However, it's necessary to give a voice to these issues. As we always say here at the Voice of Hope, at the Voice of Hope Media, we empower, we inspire, we educate, we give hope to people who are facing such challenges so that they should be able to speak up, speak out, while knowing that they will be heard and they won't be judged or stigmatized. So today, we've given a voice to autism impact on various aspects of family and community lives. And we've heard from a parent of an autistic child, Sandra. We've heard from a pediatric doctor. We've heard from an educator, Eric. We've heard from a reverend father, Father Dominic. And we've all looked at how autism has impacted us as individuals, as families, as the community, we look at the church, the school, the hospitals, and what have you. We are looking forward to having more conversations in this area. April that just passed was Autism Awareness Month, but in an autism community, we always say autism awareness or autism doesn't end in April. In an autism family, it continues all year round. It is 365 days or 366 days a year. So we cannot stop talking about autism just because it's the end of April. It has to continue. And we will continue other conversations on this show this May, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And that is still another topic that needs to be given a voice to, that many have to talk about. Parents of autistic individuals have also struggled with their mental health at some point in the journey. Individuals who are autistic, children or adults, they also suffer with depression and other forms of mental health problems at some point, where we still need to talk about to be able to seek the help that we need. So thank you so much, everyone. Those who were watching, our audience, you were brilliant. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your messages and your questions. Feel free to contact any of our guest speakers here if you need more information from them, if you need to pick their brains as a parent, as a doctor, as a teacher, as a reverend father. They are all here. This is how we network. So you get connected with people, you pick their brains, you let them know how they can help you or how you can help them. We've been live for 1 hour 38 minutes and it's been a brilliant conversation. Thank you once more. And you've been watching live here on the Voice of Hope Media on Facebook and also on our YouTube channel. So you have a good evening and it's a happy bank holiday. It's a long weekend. Tomorrow is bank holiday here in the UK and have a good evening. Thank you so much. Bye bye for now.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bless you.